X Factor number 10 is both the conclusion of the series and the conclusion of the X-Men Hellfire Gala, and it's an issue full of controversial decisions and plots, including major setup for what's to come in the X-line after the gala. Today I'll answer, what is the controversy surrounding X Factor number 10? Who is found murdered at the end of the gala that will set up the trial of Magneto, plus theories and predictions for what's to come as we move forward through 2021 X-Men Comics. Hey everybody, I'm Dave Busing, founder and editor-in-chief of comicbookherald.com. You are listening to Krakin Krakoa number 191 as we conclude this month of Hellfire Gala comics in this somewhat loose X-Men crossover. If you like the Comic Book Herald YouTube channel, please consider liking, subscribing, sharing, and commenting. It all helps me out a great deal. I'll also be around today for Casual Krakoa, which I'm trying to do every Wednesday that new X-Men comics are released. That will occur circa between 5 and 5:30 Central Standard Time. Join us live, or of course you can find all of those live eps in the playlists for the Reign of X and all of the Hickman era of X-Men discussions through Krakin Krakoa and Casual Krakoa. You can find all the episodes in the playlist, which are linked in the show notes. Spoilers for Discussed Comics will follow. Story by Leah Williams and David Baldeon, art by David Baldeon, David Messina, and Lucas Werneck, colors by Israel Silva, and letters by Joe Caramagna. This issue spends a lot of time, and I'd argue somewhat too much, recycling the Hellfire Gala images we've already seen, right? We get to see X Factor get ready for the gala, everyone gets dressed up in their stunning, frankly, mutant designs, good work, Jumbo Carnation, and then they go to the gala, and most of what we actually see occurring at the gala is very focused on crossing over and sort of connecting to the full event, right? We see crossover with Hellions, we see crossover with the way these characters interacted in Excalibur. All of that is occurring, and it's very much, putting a bow on what has been a giant mutant event. We do also get an interesting moment here of Carmen from the Children of the Atom at the Hellfire Gala meeting Iboy. That feels kind of like a spoiler. Maybe my memory's just fuzzy on Children of the Atom. Very, very possible, but I don't remember anyone from that unit, in particular Carmen, actually making it through the Krakoan gates to the gala just yet. But I mean, call me out if I'm way off on that, but that actually felt like it kind of gave something away going on in Children of the Atom. As far as focus goes, there's a quote early on in this says, trauma reshapes a person, but healing from it does too. And we get Decan and Aurora revealing in this issue, the new romantic pairing throughout X Factor, that Aurora actually killed a bunch of the mutant bigots from X Factor number 1, which is a mystery I had forgotten, basically, that had brought the team together, that brought X Factor together, and that Decan, went and killed the rest of them. So Aurora hid this by dying, okay? And X Factor number 1 made it look like she was the one who was killed by these bigoted individuals. And in reality, it's actually a story now about, both Decan and Aurora have broken one of the 3 Krakoan laws, kill no man, okay? And are essentially hiding from that. Is that something that will be outed as the X-Men line continues? It certainly could be. So, again, the gang gets ready for the gala, but Prodigy, he steps away. And David Aladdin, traces his clues here he left for himself to investigate his own unsolved murder. Now, this is a plot that's been building for over a year in X Factor, and as I guessed during my predictions of the Trial of Magneto, it's too big of a loose thread for Williams and Baldeon to pass on to another creative team. If you watched the predictions I did for the Trial of Magneto all the way to the end, I basically said, okay, Lee Williams is writing the Trial of Magneto. That implies to me that X Factor number 10, there has to be something here touching on this giant mystery of Prodigy before we get to that point. And that's absolutely what, it's a one of the many plots in this book, but we get a focus here. It definitely eats up the most attention and has eaten up the most conversation for good reason. So Prodigy sets up these clues before his death so that his resurrected self could take down a serial killer targeting young queer black men. And the idea of Prodigy as this mutant detective, right, actually sounds like a pretty cool focus for a book or for a miniseries, but I think it's important as we get into this that X Factor was not that book. It was never that book, and it's really only in this one issue, in this limited amount of pages, where that is kind of the story that we're getting, even though obviously there was setup for the mystery of how Prodigy actually died previously. Now, what we get is a big jump here where David then goes and visits Buck Thatcher, this rich murderer, based on Ed Buck, okay? This is real ripped from the headlines plotting. For those who don't know, Buck is a real-world wealthy business and political influencer charged with drugging and sexually assaulting young black men. from what I can tell, Buck's trial is still a very real thing that is closing in, scheduling now for July 13th, 2021. The trial hasn't even officially happened yet, in large part, it seems like, because of the pandemic. Now, I don't know that the tone of this comic, touching on such a serious, real subject, works at all. In fact, I very much feel that it does not. X-Factor is, throughout its 10 issues, which is all this series is going to get, this is the final issue. It's canceled from this point forward. It's been flirtatious and very queer and fun, and all 10 issues spin a lot of plates at the same time. It's been a book that has very much been looking at, a lot of plots and a lot of character at the same time, but that approach doesn't really work when you're like dropping something this heavy as like the fourth plot during a mutant party event, meaning you'll only have a handful of pages to address what's happening. And the end result is that the mystery of Prodigy and David's revenge against his killer and likely sexual assaulter feels badly rushed and mismanaged. And that's what a lot of fans are reacting very negatively to today about X-Factor number 10, which I don't think it can be emphasized enough, was a tremendously, and I think in the end will continue to be after some time has passed, but like a tremendously celebrated work for being, this is the most LGBTQ representation in any Marvel comic, but certainly of the X-Men line, and I think it's been celebrated for that. I also don't really know that there's anything in the build to David's resurrection mystery that prepared us for this, and that feels like a crucial misstep. It could have been anything. Like, there could have been literally any rationale for what happened that David's, like the question around he was resurrected, but proof of death was not confirmed. Like, he didn't actually know how he died, or even if his older self even had died officially. That story could have been literally anything. It could have been supernatural, it could have been mystical, it could have involved aliens. Like, this is the Marvel Universe. That could have gone in a lot of directions. So Williams and Baldeon, they're writing the same X-Factor they have been all along, and to the point that there are two pages of letter send-offs at the end of X-Factor here. Both creators get to say, like, hey, it's been a ride. What a great time I've had. And honestly, like, even in the best of times, it feels way too self-serving. But they wrote their celebration of this squad and of the queerness of it, and that celebration did not appropriately set the stage to handle this Buck Thatcher plot, in my opinion. I really don't think that it did. So it eats up just so much of what is happening here in X-Factor number 10. Again, tonally, it's simply hard to reconcile the horror of Buck's real-world crimes with the cavalier and relaxed attitude of the cast as they're uncovering this. Decan and Aurora, they come to help Prodigy and Iboy basically, resolve the situation. And they literally leave the murder mansion, this house of horrors, flirting and laughing with David's body bag. The original Prodigy here is in the basement. There's a corpse of Prodigy, and Decan has it like in a body bag on his back as he and Aurora again like laugh and flirt and go off to celebrate the gala. Like, it's just tonally, there's just so much dissonance. Ultimately, I'm sure it's a well-intentioned misfire that serves as a very strong reminder of the overwhelming whiteness of the X-Office and Marvel's writers, both now and throughout history. As fans and critics, I think the best thing we can do is listen to the marginalized communities affected, in this case, queer black men. And already it's a great reminder that there's no monolith of opinion on these things. I've seen critics happy that X-Factor calls attention to predatory, monstrous threats like Buck. And I've also seen critics absolutely devastated by the poor handling of exploiting black queer trauma. The key, as always, I think, is to listen. Acknowledging black suffering is not the same as understanding black suffering. And I think too often we're seeing those things conflated into entertainment. Again, though, I'm going to share some reading in the show notes that I think elucidates the challenges and missteps of the plot. And even if that's not the reaction you had to the material, I'd encourage you to consider why others feel that way. I think there's really valuable criticism and insights to be gained there for comics in the future. So elsewhere in the story, there's one major thing happening here as far as like the X-Factor cast, and it is that Iboy apparently has eye magic. This was news to me. I think probably news to everyone. There's been a massive power set glow up for Iboy, and I'm really curious what significance that might hold. I think on one hand, Baldeon creatively, design-wise, his panel layouts are so effective at leveraging Iboy's abilities and the way that this character, his mutant ability, can let him see so many things. Iboy's glow up, it actually reminds me a lot of Cypher circa like Necrotia. If you read that X event, about a decade ago, where Cypher started to say things like, I can read body language, and like therefore all of a sudden Doug Ramsey, the wimpy little New Mutant, was like the best possible fighter, because he was like, I can speak everything. Like body language is a language. I can read that, therefore I know what you're going to do. Iboy's entering that territory where his power set is just expanding and expanding and expanding. I'm genuinely very curious what is going to become of this character after X Factor. But the big thing that most people will be talking about today from X Factor number 10 is the final page, where we get Tommy shows up to hang with Prodigy and Iboy at the gala at like 4 a.m., which is way too late to be partying, I will say. But they find Wanda's body. Okay, they find Wanda Maximoff. So this was definitely Scarlet Witch dying in this issue, of the murder mystery setup for the Trial of Magneto, an event series that's going to come. Wanda was definitely the favorite, I think. I'm not alone in expecting it. Sort of number 6 last week, where we had Scarlet Witch show up to talk to Magneto at like 3 a.m. post-gala. That all but confirmed this is what would happen, the death of the Scarlet Witch. A couple thoughts here, and then I'll talk plenty about this in today's casual Krakoa chat as well. One, X Factor doesn't really touch on Scarlet Witch at all, again, with the exception of the use of Tommy as a character throughout this book. So this really only makes sense if you've read Sword number 6, which is where her and Magneto actually get a moment, and we actually get a little bit of characterization. That's kind of disappointing, considering this is teased as the lead-in to the Trial of Magneto event. It's really only a lead-in because of this, like, 2 panels where we actually see officially who it is that would, the murder that will spiral into that event. And then I think too, like, making the Trial of Magneto the big story that digs into Wanda as the Great Pretender feels like the best big picture play to me. But killing her as the setup has the potential to make this yet another story about Wanda without actually involving her. And that kind of sucks. We've had a billion of those since House Event. I think one thing WandaVision proved to me earlier this year was that I actually really like Scarlet Witch when the character is the actual focus of the story and not just a plaything for all the characters around her. I hope Trial of Magneto recognizes this and does not make those same mistakes, because it does appear to be on a path towards that. In the end, I think X Factor number 10, this book could have easily just been a victory lap for what was a very celebrated series, and Williams and Baldeon, they recognized that. Again, I haven't seen a comic, I don't know if ever, where the creators, where 2 creators get letters at the end of it to talk about what a ride it's been, and instead they took a massive gamble. They gambled massively with Prodigy's storyline, and they lost the bet. Again, given the final, reaction, I don't think anyone involved knew what they were stepping in. And that's just another good argument for diversity and sensitivity from the top down, because that is absolutely going to overshadow the run for a good long while, is the way that it ended. And again, too, it's like the way that it was canceled and then forced into, I don't even want to say forced into, but then, again, you get one chance to end the book within issue 10, and this is what you get. And I think it's going to be disappointing for a lot of readers, although, again, it's controversy. That means there are multiple sides, and it's well worth listening to those who are impacted and hearing, why emotions are running high on this one. So the Krakoan at the end of X Factor number 10 reads Trial of Magneto, of course, which we know is the event coming. And again, I'll be talking about that in casual Krakoa. But let me know what you thought about the issues today. Again, I'll include a link in the show notes for what I recommend for some reading. And of course, you can find the full Reign of X reading order and the Hellfire Gala reading order over on comicbookherald.com. Thanks to those who support the site. You can support Comic Book Herald Works over on patreon.com/comicbookherald. I'm Dave. You can find my stuff at Comic Book Herald on social. Look for the best comics ever in My Marvelous Year podcast for more from me. Thanks everybody for listening, and as always, enjoy the comics.